Welcome to Hive Studios. My name is Lina Vaz. I'm the content editor at Hive, and with me today I have Jonathan de Mello, CEO and founder of JDM Retail. The pandemic has certainly accelerated e-commerce, so much so that some people even question the survival of the high street. Many businesses were forced to close their bricks and mortar stores, while shopping both online and on social media has registered a significant growth during this period. All these changes led to hybrid retail, combining online, social and offline shopping. To help us understand this phenomenon, we have with us Jonathan de Mello, founder and chief executive of JDM Retail. Good morning and thank you so much for being with us. First of all, can you tell us a bit about your business journey and how first you came across the retail industry?
Yeah, morning, Lina. Retail I fell into to a certain extent because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left university, so I went travelling around the world for 2 years, literally 2 years of just enjoying myself and experiencing the world really. And from there, went back to the UK with a view to get a graduate job, but I looked into different roles and some of the big four consulting firms were quite interesting and applied to those. Got offered jobs, but I actually went for a niche retail consultancy firm called Management Horizons, and it was a really good experience because the people there it was a small business, the people there were very senior in what they did. Partners, and they really taught me a lot. So that's how I came into it really. It was not by design, it was just through sheer chance. But I knew that I wanted to do something tangible, something that you can see on the high street and in shopping malls. Day by day, you see how retail evolves, how it lives and changes. And for me, that was really interesting. So I knew that if I got involved in retail consulting, that whatever I do and whatever I consulted on, I could actually see the results of that flourishing in the high street potentially, as retailers expand or shopping malls get bought or invested in. So to me, retail now, looking back over 25 plus years of doing it, it was really a good choice, even though it was by chance that I came into it.
Retail used to be quite straightforward, but nowadays people tend to jump from one platform to another, buy online to pick up in store, or buy on social media. How can retailers keep up with this?
Retail's become omni-channel over the years. It was catalysed, I guess, by the advent of the internet probably 20 years ago now, actually. And since then, people have moved to online shopping. It's become pervasive. The likes of Amazon are dominant now in the sector. And the majority, not the majority, but certainly a big chunk of spend, non-food spend, goes through Amazon day by day in the UK and obviously globally as well. So retailers have had to evolve with the times, as we've seen a dampening consumer spending, various crises, obviously COVID being the most recent one, but also the cost of living crisis we're seeing right now too. So there's been lots of issues in retail, and retailers have had to diversify. As people have been in lockdown, during COVID, there's been a situation where people had no choice but to go online to shop. And so retailers have heavily invested in distribution channels which are non-physical, so e-commerce, m-commerce and all the rest of it. So essentially, I'd say retailers now are tech savvy and have modernised, but it's been a long journey for some of them, and they find it hard to keep pace with the likes of Amazon in terms of EBITDAs, margins, because it's generally cheaper to service people online because you don't have the physical shops, the payroll that comes with all of that. So really, I'd say retail is now very much about multiple channels as opposed to one channel, but some retailers are still stuck behind the times to a certain extent, and those are the ones that we've seen struggle and even fail, the likes of Arcadia and all their brands, Topshop, Miss Selfridge, Evans, Wallace, but also Debenhams and some of the department stores too.
And like Milan or Paris, the average rent for stores in London has actually dropped. Why is this happening?
I'd say rent in London has dropped, but it depends what you're looking at. So core London, Bond Street, Regent Street, etc., the prime areas that are managed streets, they have seen less strong rent reductions than elsewhere across the UK. So I'd say Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, comparable cities, or smaller cities, but certainly strong cities, have dropped by about 11% on average in prime areas. Whereas Bond Street, the core, West End, has probably dropped more like 5 to 6%. So because of lack of supply in a sense, so that street is static, it doesn't change. It's a number of units and that's it. So and demand is still strong from global retailers to trade stores. So yes, it has dropped, but it hasn't dropped as much as the rest of the UK. But when you compare it against European cities, that supply is even more constrained. So Milan and Paris, as you say, rents have dropped a bit, but they haven't dropped as far as, say, London or the rest of the UK. And again, it's a supply-demand thing. There's a lack of supply in some of these markets. And so because that capacity is constrained, demand is strong, therefore, we haven't seen as much of a drop in those markets.
That's perfect. Do you think we will see more pop-up stores in the high street? Because in terms of cost, they're less demanding.
Pop-up stores are absolutely becoming more prevalent these days because there's an excess of supply. So London aside, lots of high streets across the UK have a surplus of space, because of the demise of the department stores, the demise of many other retailers during COVID, and even, through the time that the internet was sort of pushing physical retail very hard, and we saw administrations and CVAs. So we have seen vacancy rates of beyond 20% in some high streets, even good ones. And so there has been an increased demand for pop-up space as a result, because retailers want agility to a certain extent, so they don't necessarily want to sort of, commit too much to a particular location without testing it first, and a pop-up allows them to do that, whilst minimising their cost, in terms of fitting out the store. They pay less in the way of rent from a pop-up, but they can still test the concept and test the consumer demand. So pop-ups absolutely are in demand, and we've seen two types of pop-ups. One is the retailers taking their own space and fitting it out themselves, and the other is the rise of Appear Here and other sorts of pop-up concepts that allow the retailer to lease essentially a white box, and they put the screens in, they put the staff in, and then the retailer essentially just showcases their product and it's sold by the staff in the store. So those two types, and I think the prevalence of kind of the latter, the more chain pop-ups is increasing, which is probably a good thing because it allows for a certain level of consistency. Landlords get a good covenant, in terms of rent payments and all the rest of it. So I think pop-ups are certainly something that will only ever increase.
And is there an impact in the business online from the pop-ups, or is there no correlation between them?
Well, physical stores do generate increased online sales, generally speaking. From the work we've done for multiple retail brands across the years, we found that where you have a physical space, it does generate additional online sales. It's what we call the halo effect. So when consumers walk past the store, they don't necessarily buy from that store. They may experience the brand by seeing it or actually going into the store. But then, that sort of, I guess, allows for some recognition online. When they see the brand in and among other retailers, they might pick that out more. There's a high propensity to do so. So that halo effect is certainly something we've been able to measure. And for big brands that have prominent physical stores, it certainly is something that's material. So where you've got Regent Street, Oxford Street, some of these big sort of busy centres, you can see a halo effect of millions of pounds of additional revenue on online channels and wholesale channels from having a physical store. But a pop-up isn't a sort of permanent fixture. So I'd say a pop-up doesn't deliver the same level of halo as a proper, fully appointed, expensive physical store does. Because, you can't provide an experiential service in a pop-up. You can provide some service, but it's really just to showcase the brand. So I'd say a full line physical store, over a long-term period would deliver a significant halo, whereas a pop-up wouldn't do that as much. But certainly it would still deliver some level of online uplift.
How about department stores? Will they start reserving a space for pop-ups, or is this still considered a high-risk investment?
Department stores are doing that, actually, in terms of pop-ups. They are reserving spaces for pop-ups. The likes of Selfridges have done that with some high-quality pop-ups recently. John Lewis haven't done it so much. House of Fraser have, to an extent. But they benefit from being part of Fraser's group, so they have the ability to trade across multiple brands. There's Fraser's, it's Sports Direct, it's Game, USC. So lots of different brands that they can sort of provide within one space. Not necessarily pop-ups, but they have the facility to do that. And so pop-ups absolutely in department stores is a thing. But the other thing to mention is shopping malls as well. So property owners have seen big vacancies in their malls. And as I say, vacancy rates are 15% plus in some malls. Higher in high streets, I'd say, but still quite dominant in malls, the vacancy rates. So what they've looked to do is provide spaces for pop-ups where you have an area that's demarked. It could be, let's say, 20,000 square feet, within a mall. And that's purely reserved for pop-ups where different brands, be they online only or be they brands in general, like FMCG brands, can go in and provide a pop-up space for even as short as a day. There's some leases now that I've seen which are literally, you can take the space for the day But it tends to be for brands like Coca-Cola and others, to do that sort of thing. But, the longer term, sort of more online only brands, yeah, you can see pop-ups of up to 1 day to 6 months in some cases, even up to a year.
Do we see emerging designers in those kind of pop-ups, or that's just not, it's more reserved for more established brands?
Well, looking at the fashion sector, yeah, you do see some fashion players, designers are taking pop-ups as well here and there, but it tends to be few and far between. I've noticed Box Park, for example, in Shoreditch and other locations across the UK, that's providing more of a sort of designer feel, where you've got emerging fashion brands and maybe that have no physical stores but are providing space in Box Park. So that's, I guess, almost like a permanent pop-up destination in a sense. And there's more and more Box Parks opening across the UK. There's also, yeah, as I say, We Are Pop-Up appear here that are providing space for designers too to test their concepts. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say that it's more the established brands that are sort of doing that sort of thing, testing markets in that way. So you've got brands like Crew Clothing, for example, that have lots of stores across the UK, but they are also looking to open pop-ups in the London area, and so they need to take temporary space to do that.
Department stores have begun to encounter difficulties in recent years. What can be done to bring customers back in?
Well, department stores absolutely have encountered difficulties. It started in the US, I guess, 10 years ago, with the likes of Sears and others, really, starting to fail and underperform. And we saw lots of closures, lots of Macy's closing, Bloomingdale's, etc., starting to close. And then that, I guess, hit the UK market as well, and also the European market, but less so the European market because the UK has a number of chains, or had a number of chains, whereas European locations are dominated more by hypermarket anchors. So they do have department stores like in Spain, Corte Inglés or Galeries Lafayette in France, but there tends to be just one or a couple of independent ones, and that's it. So in the UK, what we've seen is a real sort of shrinkage of the department store market. Debenhams had the majority of stores and they failed. They were actually, for the most part, a lot of the stores were profitable, but it was just the amount of debt they had. So debt plays a big role. But also the department store concept is a little bit outmoded. You don't need as much floor space as you did in the past to showcase your product, because these days you've got online, and online is the biggest department store in the world, in a sense. So the likes of Debenhams, House of Fraser, John Lewis in the UK, they've needed to shrink down the size of their stores. Traditionally, some of these stores are 150,000 to 200,000 square feet. They probably need a half of that these days. So even in big sort of, Oxford Street is an example where you've got Phoenix, John Lewis, M&S and others, all of those stores have downsized and they've turned floors of what was retail space into office space or even residential where they can. So there's definitely a consolidation in the sector, both in terms of the number of stores, but also in terms of the floor space in general that's being provided.
On the other hand, we do have new store openings planned, like Gymshark will open a store in Regent Street this summer. Also Flannels has a new flagship store in Liverpool also opening this summer. Yeah. So do you think things are turning?
So physical stores are becoming important for certain types of brands. The likes of Gymshark, as you mentioned, opened a physical store in Regent Street. Flannels with Liverpool. I mean, Flannels for Liverpool really is just a marketing. It's not it's there to make money and obviously provide a marketing experience for customers that go in. But Gymshark even more so, because Gymshark, will not necessarily make huge amounts of money from the store. What they're looking to do from the store is just showcase the brand in a better light. So people might buy certain products from their business, but really it's going into the store and experiencing the full breadth of product that they offer, and great service as well.
So it's more about brand engagement.
I'd say, yeah, some of these physical stores in high traffic areas are more about brand engagement, brand equity. So the likes of Flannels, but also I'd say if you look at sort of around the UK, it's really about footfall and where the foot traffic is. So Samsung, as an example, opened a physical store in King's Cross, and that store doesn't make any money for them, but that store for them is a big marketing vehicle, to show the Samsung brand, so people can go in, experience the products, and test it and play with it. Or Microsoft, in Oxford Circus, another example of a brand showcase. So that's increasing, but only in high traffic areas. So it's not going to save the high street because, these brands wouldn't be going to Grimsby or wouldn't be going into Bootle or, North Shields, for example, but they certainly would be looking at the high traffic malls and the high traffic city centres. So London's West End, Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, and the big malls, like Westfield London, Bluewater, etc.
What's so special about a physical store?
Physical store can provide a showcase for the brands in a way that you can't get online, because online there's a lot of noise, essentially. So you have to seek out the brand that you're looking for online, whereas a physical store is it's right there in front of you as you're walking past it. So to a certain extent, you can't miss it. And then the idea is you have brand recognition, and then you go online and you buy from that brand more than you would all the other retailers that you might then look for the same products. So I'd say that the physical store provides more than just a transactional service these days. It's more about experience as well.
So more and more we're hearing about 3D virtual stores and the metaverse, NFTs. How important it is to invest in this digital arena? Is this too early for certain brands, or is this something retailers should actually be considering right now?
I think the metaverse is absolutely a channel that should be considered at this point in time, but perhaps not fully invested in at this point in time as well, because you've got lots of different metaverses. Decentraland is one of them, but there's 3 or 4 others that I've heard of. So which one do you invest in, if you're a retailer, and which one do consumers go to? Because consumers are inherently fickle. To me, it reminds me a little bit of search engines, when you had Yahoo and Ask Jeeves and all these others, and it eventually consolidated into Google. Or the same as, as sort of WhatsApp becoming more dominant in its sector, the mobile messaging sector. So I think we will see some consolidation, and I think the winner will be Facebook, or Meta as they're called these days, because they have everyone's data, essentially, through WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. They own all of that. So what they could do, and I think they will do, is create one metaverse which is free for everyone to get into. They can make people's avatars from their pictures, essentially, on Facebook, which is easy to do. And so they can provide the best possible, category-killing metaverse. And I think that's exactly what they're looking to do by changing their name to Meta. So I think I would probably wait and see before I invest heavily as a retailer. I think still it's worth looking at Decentraland and all these other ones, but I think it will consolidate into one metaverse, because ultimately consumers don't want to go into lots of different metaverses. The technology also isn't there at home yet, in terms of VR headsets. So we do have VR, but it's very expensive, and there's no one clear player in that either. You've got Oculus Rift, which is the Facebook one. You've got other sorts of VR headsets too. But to get into the metaverse and immerse yourself in it properly, I'd say that there's still a bit of time to pass before, as a retailer, you want to heavily invest in it, creating a physical store and everything else. But it's definitely something that should be looked at and considered at boardroom level, as a channel to look at. And as things evolve, potentially, yes, the metaverse is something to look at.
In terms of sustainability, what can retailers do to regain their consumers' trust and improve their sustainability credentials right now?
Well, sustainability is one of the key boardroom topics at this point in time, and it's certainly been pushed up consumers' mindsets with all the issues we've seen, globally, the environment in general, and just how millennials are perceiving themselves and their impact on the environment when they buy products. And fast fashion, on the other hand, has been, I guess, it's impacted the environment to a degree, in that products you can throw them away and buy a new one extremely quickly. Buy them online. It's Primark and others have really sort of cornered that market to a large degree. But retailers, certainly are, some of them at least, are looking to invest in sustainability more and more. The Coca-Cola store pop-up I mentioned, for example, it pushes that subject extremely hard, sustainability all the way through the store, which is good. And ironic in a sense, in terms of them as a brand and what they've done to Brazilian rainforests and that sort of thing, But I'd say that it is absolutely a topic, and ESG is becoming more and more important. So most retailers these days have appointed someone to head their ESG and look at the social impact of what they're doing as well as the environmental impact. So it is certainly key. It's just how they do it. What I would say is that physical stores, though, to me, are more environmentally friendly than online, because if you think about online and how it's distributed, we've got increased warehousing space, increased logistics, and therefore movement of trucks and vans in residential areas, and that is creating lots of congestion. So we're starting to see more and more traffic through high streets, through people ordering online. But the thing is, Amazon and others, you would order, say you order 5 products, sometimes they can come in different times, so you get 5 different deliveries sometimes for the same, order. If you're not in, then they have to come back, so there's a lot of additional pollution, air pollution through online home delivery, which
and
I think physical stores.
Packaging as well.
The packaging as well is an important facet because they're in boxes and polystyrene and that sort of thing. So packaging, congestion, all leads to potentially the fact that online has a higher carbon footprint than physical stores. So how do retailers become more sustainable? Well, they can invest more in physical stores.
One last question. What should retailers be investing right now? What should be their priorities for the near future?
Well, the cost of living crisis is the key facet that retailers need to really tackle right now. Inflation's rising, and what do they do in that instance? Because their costs are rising hugely through supply chain issues. It's harder to recruit staff for logistics and warehousing as well, so their payroll costs have gone up. So wage inflation is certainly not outpacing the rates of inflation in general, and so wages have to go up and up. So retailers' costs are rising, so how do they pass on the cost to the consumer? Or do they, because they'll lose demand then? So because consumers are feeling pinched, we're starting to see a coalescing, I guess, of a falling in consumer demand and also rising costs. So retailers are really going to feel a pinch very soon, and it's how they tackle that issue is the key. So becoming more efficient, investing in technology is one area. Partnerships, in improving collaboration with certain suppliers could also be another area. But fundamentally, it's about sort of focusing on their products and, back to basics essentially for retail, which is moving the right products to the consumer at the right time. And that's something that some retailers will be able to do effectively and others not. The likes of Next are very effective at doing that, for example, and planning ahead. So they've already got their autumn, winter season planned. They will be increasing prices, but, they've got the product lined up and everything else. So I'd say they're a good paragon of kind of where other retailers need to get to. But yeah, I'd say that the cost of living crisis is certainly the biggest concern for retail right now. And it's how retailers tackle it that will be key.
So thank you so much for being with us today and for your amazing insights about the retail industry.
Thank you, Lina. Really good to see you again.
And thank you to all of you for watching.